Dead Air Part 2. Chapter 10. Dead Man Broadcasting. Elise Mercer no longer wondered if Kessler was alive. The voice on the radio wasn't archived or remixed. It was live. It responded. It knew her timing, her thoughts, her progress. And worst of all, it anticipated her next move. Which meant she needed to act before she started listening to him again. She'd already been down that road once. Maybe more. She just didn't remember. But memory wasn't a requirement anymore. Only control was. And Elise was finally ready to take it back. She spent the rest of the night analyzing the raw signal data from 108.7 FM, triangulating the transmission strength from 3 different capture points across the city. Most pirate radio broadcasts were small, crude operations that transmitted from makeshift rooftops, abandoned warehouses, or parked vans. But this signal was clean. Stable. Repetitive. Too consistent for something illegal. It felt like a system. One with protocols. A structure. And that meant it had infrastructure. By sunrise, she had narrowed it down to an 8-block industrial zone in the outskirts of Belridge. Mostly condemned buildings, all within range of her 3 strongest captures. She called in a favor from a friend at the FCC, someone she trusted enough not to ask questions. "I'm looking for unauthorized low-frequency radio emissions," she told him. "Anything weird coming off warehouse roofs? Unregistered antennas. Quiet activity." The voice on the other end hesitated. Then came a reluctant admission. "There's been a hotspot out by Sector 14. It pings maybe twice a week. No formal complaint. We figured it was a squatter running old gear. Not worth a visit." She thanked him, hung up, and packed a bag. 1 sidearm. 1 recorder. 2 phones, 1 burned of all data. And a thermal camera. Whatever was happening out there, she wasn't going in blind. She arrived just after noon. Sector 14 was a graveyard of concrete and rust. Rows of derelict buildings with caved-in roofs, broken fencing, and rotting metal signage. She moved quietly between them, listening to the pulse of her own breath, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down like fog. Then her signal scanner chirped. A clean spike. She turned left, toward the edge of the district. A small 4-story structure stood alone, no signage, no visible entry, windows blacked out from the inside. A fire escape wound up one side like a spine. At the top, a faint glint of metal. She raised her thermal camera. The roof glowed faint orange. Heat signature. Equipment. Broadcasting equipment. She climbed. Every step creaked with fatigue, her heartbeat hammering in time with her boots. When she reached the top, her breath caught. There it was. An antenna. Jury-rigged, but sophisticated. Powered by a portable solar array and a battery cell. Wires fed through a hole in the roof. Someone had been keeping this alive, discreetly, methodically for months. She stepped closer, holding out a wide-range mic. The static returned. Then the voice. "Kessler." "Curious," he said gently. "You always did like to solve puzzles backwards. That's what made you such a good candidate." She turned off the receiver and descended into the building. The interior was dark, completely stripped except for the 4th floor, which had been converted into a crude operations room. Dozens of tape reels lined the walls. Cassette decks. Audio monitors. A typewriter. On the desk, an open notebook. Familiar handwriting. Her own. She flipped through the pages. No dates. No names. Only affirmations. "I trust the signal. I remember when I'm told. I am not Elise. I am the channel." Each one written over and over, like lines from a punishment exercise. She turned the page. There was a diagram, rough, hand-drawn, of the city. Marked on it were 12 locations, spread evenly across the map. Every one of them was a relay point. Transmission nodes. She was standing at one of them. This wasn't a pirate broadcast. It was a network. A synchronized system, with built-in redundancy. If she destroyed one, the others would continue. Kessler could be anywhere, or nowhere at all. A distributed broadcast loop, powered by a ghost. She searched the room. Found a drawer with unlabeled tapes. She picked one at random and played it. Her voice. But this time, she was speaking to someone. "Hello?" she said gently. "If you're listening, you've triggered Phase 3. That means memory has returned. You're experiencing disorientation, maybe anger. That's normal. You're close." Another pause. "Don't destroy this node. It's not the source. The source is internal. It always has been. You won't find Kessler out there. You'll find him in here." She shut the tape off. It wasn't a message to her. It was a message from her, to a future self who might try to unravel the system. A safeguard. A leash. She sank into the chair, stunned. Her mind had been rewritten to defend itself, from itself. Every time she got close, her own voice talked her back from the edge. And worst of all, she had no idea if she was the one writing the rules anymore. Chapter 11, The Trigger Word. The air in the relay building was growing stale. Elise sat perfectly still, staring at the last tape she'd played, her voice, coaching herself not to go further. Not to resist. Not to interfere. But it was too late for that now. She packed the notebook and a handful of tapes into her bag and left the building without touching the transmission rig. Something in her gut told her, this isn't the nest. It's just another speaker in the ceiling. The signal wasn't coming from here. It was coming from her. She had to go deeper. Into her own programming. And for that, she needed help. Elise returned to her apartment just after midnight and opened her private contact list, buried in a drive labeled Postmortem Failsafes. Only one name was marked with a double asterisk. Dr. Matteo Island. A controversial cognitive specialist. Former DARPA contract researcher. He disappeared from public life after being linked to experimental neurolinguistic conditioning during the Gulf Project era. The kind of man you didn't contact unless you were desperate. She called a number labeled only EM override. It rang once. Then a voice answered. "Did you finally remember me?" She didn't respond at first. Just breathed. "I need to know if I have a trigger." There was silence. Then softly, "You don't have a trigger, Elise. You have many. But one of them matters more than the others." She gripped the phone tighter. "Redbird," she said. "That's the one, isn't it?" Island sighed on the other end. "It's the primer. The gateway. It doesn't do anything on its own, it just unlocks the door. After that, anything said in the right cadence, by the right voice, can step through." She closed her eyes. She'd heard that word at least twice in the last 2 weeks. Once on a voicemail. Once in a therapy session recording. Had she changed afterward? Had something shifted? "How do I shut it off?" "You can't," Island replied. "You have to override it. And for that, you need to enter the state again. Induced. Monitored. Controlled." She knew what he was offering. Hypnotic regression. Dangerous. Potentially irreversible. But she had no choice. The next day, she met him in a private research office hidden behind a closed-down bookstore in Midtown. It was dimly lit, lined with vintage equipment, and EEG machines, audio mixers, and dusty books with titles like Linguistic Entrapment Systems and Cortical Vulnerabilities in Memory Insertion. He was older now. Slower. But sharp as ever. "You understand," he said. "We might find things you chose to forget." She nodded. "I need to know what he put in me." What I let him put in me. They started the session at 10:06 p.m. Elise lay back in a worn leather chair as Island placed the EEG contacts along her scalp. Her heart was pounding so loud, it distorted the baseline readings. But she focused on the metronome. Tick, tick, tick. He began guiding her backward. "Return to the space where you first heard the word. Not on tape. Not on air. The first real moment. You are safe here." She exhaled. The world around her began to dissolve. Her mind reached back, peeling away the weeks, then months. Then, she was in a room. White walls. No windows. A chair. A mirror. Across from her sat Kessler. Not dead. Not a memory. A man. Smiling. And he said the word. "Redbird." Elise blinked. Her posture changed. Her eyes softened. Her breath slowed. And then she spoke. "What do you need me to do?" The words came out automatically. Island whispered through the headset. "Hold on to that version of you. Let it speak." Kessler leaned forward in the memory. "You're going to forget everything after the last session. But when you hear Redbird, you'll remember only what I allow. Do you understand?" "Yes." "And if someone interferes? They become the anomaly. I will correct it." The blood drained from Island's face as he watched her speak these words. In the chair, Elise's voice deepened slightly. "She's not supposed to be here yet. You're accelerating the timeline. She isn't ready." Island's eyes widened. This wasn't memory playback. This was active code. He moved to terminate the session, but Elise grabbed his wrist. Not violently, but with impossible precision. She looked at him, eyes glazed. "You're not the one who wakes me." And then she collapsed forward. The EEG went wild. Screaming brain activity. Theta spikes. Subauditory response surges. It was like her mind had split in two, one still submerged, one trying to surface. When she came to, Elise was lying on the floor. Sweat soaked through her shirt. Island was pale. Shaking. You've been partitioned," he said. "That wasn't memory. That was a persona. An embedded command set. You're running two minds, Elise. One waking. One, listening." She sat up slowly. "Then help me wake up." He hesitated. "There's a risk. You might lose one of them permanently. Depending on which you suppress, you may not like who's left." She stared ahead, unblinking. "If I don't shut this down," she said, "there won't be anything left of me at all." Chapter 12, The Archive. 3 days after the regression session with Island, Elise Mercer stood in front of a forgotten building in South Belridge, half swallowed by overgrowth and shadows. The city had long moved past this district, but the building still stood, silent, watching. The address had come from Island. He called it Kessler's Graveyard. A defunct medical archive buried beneath the old research wing of a now-defunded university hospital. Officially sealed for asbestos mitigation. Unofficially, abandoned mid-investigation after a classified behavioral study went off the rails. The name of the project, DAD. Directive for Enhanced Adaptive Dissociation. And Elise's name was still on the internal patient list. She didn't hesitate. The lock was old. Rusted. She broke it easily. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mildew. Files lay scattered on desks, half-burned printouts curled with age. Time had peeled the walls. Fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects overhead, some flickering faintly despite no visible power source. She passed exam rooms with one-way mirrors, observation chairs still bolted to the floor. Each one labeled P01 Carrier, Status, Retired. P02 Recorder, Status, Failed. P03 Messenger, Status, Deceased. P04 Switch, Status, Active. That last one stopped her. P04 Switch. Active. There was no name on the tag. But she didn't need one. That was her. Her boots echoed as she stepped deeper into the rear corridor, guided by a low hum, barely perceptible, like a machine left running just out of sight. The walls narrowed. More secure. She passed a locked steel door with a biometric panel long since shorted out. The placard above read, Archival Vault, Audio/Session Recordings, Access, Kessler only. Elise scanned the panel with a field frequency reader. Still warm. She forced the door open using an emergency manual override, exposing a sublevel stairwell lined with cold cement and flickering blue light below. At the bottom, a vault-like room filled with shelves. Hundreds of analog tapes, reel-to-reel spools, flash drives, black binders. Every wall catalogued. And everything meticulously labeled with timestamps, codes, and patient IDs. She found her shelf. E. Mercer, Sessions 01, 143. Subject role, Phase Switch Initiator. She scanned until she reached Session 72. The one marked Post-Implant Acknowledgement. She played it. Her voice younger, brighter, but oddly flat. Today we confirmed that I no longer respond to external memory cues unless scripted. Identity separation has begun. In an emergency, use command string, Redbird plus identify purpose. If properly conditioned, I will reply, correct the anomaly. The tape went silent for a moment. Then Kessler's voice came through. You're the gate, Elise. Not the wall. Not the lock. The gate. They'll never suspect you because they'll never think you'd let this happen willingly. That's the genius. She heard herself laugh, just faintly. That was always the trick, wasn't it? Build a weapon that doesn't know it's a weapon. Kessler. And when it does realize? Elise. Then it completes the mission. She backed away from the tape. Everything she feared was true. She hadn't been brainwashed. She had volunteered. There were no monsters pulling her strings. She wrote the choreography herself. And worst of all, she had built fail-safes. Backup commands. Triggers. Loops. Just like the one embedded in the notebook she now carried with her, with the phrase, "Don't trust any version of you that calms you." Because she had known, long ago, that she would try to reassure herself. And she'd planned for that too. She sat on the floor of the archive, surrounded by the echoes of her own voice, her own handwriting, her own design. Not a victim. A participant. She pulled out her recorder and whispered a message to herself. Not a reminder. A warning. If you're listening to this and you still believe you were manipulated, you're not ready yet. But if you've stopped looking for the villain and started looking in the mirror, then it's time. Initiate Phase 4. Then she clicked record off and turned toward the final vault door at the back of the room. Labeled only, Live Subject Files, Do Not Remove. Chapter 13, The First Volunteer. The room at the back of the archive was colder than the others. Elise stood before the final vault door, Live Subject Files, Do Not Remove, her hand resting on the handle. Unlike the rest of the building, this one was pristine. The door had no rust. The keypad blinked softly. Operational. No one had broken into it. But someone had maintained it. A backup generator rumbled faintly through the walls. power was still being routed here from somewhere. And that meant someone wanted it accessible. Not to the public. Not even to colleagues. To her. She typed in the only code that mattered anymore. Red bird. The door clicked. Inside was a small, sterile room. No computers. No technology apart from a central terminal bolted to the floor. Shelves of bound files filled the left wall. Along the right, 6 sealed containers, each marked with a single name and a 4-digit code. She read them carefully. P01, Halberd, deceased. P02, Lana Jiang, failed. P03, Serena Clark, terminated. P04, Elise Mercer, active. P05, Kessler, Adrian, creator. P06, unknown, volunteer. She stared at the 6th. No name. No file. Just volunteer. The drawer was empty. No tape. No folder. No body. Only a note inside, folded carefully. On the outside, in case she forgets again. She opened it. It wasn't written in her handwriting. It was a letter, handwritten, rushed, by someone who had known her before. Before the regression. Before the conditioning. Before the signal. Elise, you asked for this. Not under duress. Not manipulated. You were the first to volunteer. You believed in the project. You believed in its purpose. But the others? They didn't survive it. Lana broke after the 3rd reprogramming. Serena turned violent. Halbert set himself on fire. You adapted. You weren't built to forget. You were built to hide. And you knew that one day, you'd come looking again. So I'm telling you what you wouldn't let Kessler say out loud. You were the architect. You were the control group. You were the first volunteer. And when this ends, you'll try to forget again. Don't. It's your last chance to stay real. The signature at the bottom was blurred by a water stain, but part of it remained. M. Jiang. Elise sank to the floor. Lana Jiang. The 2nd subject. Failed. But this wasn't written to Elise. It was written for her. Meant to survive her memory lapses. Meant to survive her conditioning. She had wanted the truth preserved somewhere. And now it was in her hands. But why? What purpose could possibly justify becoming the test case for psychological annihilation? She opened the folder marked P05, Kessler, Adrian. Inside was a series of interview transcripts. One stood out, labeled P04/Creator Interface Session 1. She read, Kessler, why do you want to go under, Elise? Elise, because I need to disappear in a way that matters. Kessler, that's a poetic answer. Not a scientific one. Elise, then here's the scientific one. Because if someone can be programmed to destroy and not know it, someone else can be programmed to resist and not break. We've spent decades studying how to weaponize the mind. I want to see if it can be used to protect instead. Kessler, protect who? Elise, all of us. From ourselves. She stopped reading. All this time she'd assumed the worst. That she was a pawn. A puppet. A lab rat. But the truth was darker than that. She was the one who built the cage, then locked herself inside it, voluntarily. Not for glory. Not for punishment. But as an act of belief. She had believed that if the human mind could be programmed to obey violence without resistance, then maybe it could also be conditioned to resist violence without remembering why. She had made herself the battlefield. A mind split in two. One side the hunter. One side the leash. But that leash was fraying. The kills were happening again. And the signal was no longer waiting. It was calling. She returned to the terminal in the center of the room. One command prompt blinked on screen. Awaiting Phase 4 activation. There was only one field to enter. Command authorization. She typed. Remember me. The screen flickered. Then went dark. Then one final phrase appeared. Phase 4 initiated. The anomaly is awake. She didn't know what Phase 4 was. But she was about to find out. Chapter 14, Obedient Monster. The words on the screen glared like a curse in fluorescent light. Phase 4 initiated. The anomaly is awake. The anomaly. That was what she was now. A fault line in her own architecture. Not subject. Not puppet. Not patient. A breach. And somewhere deep inside her, a part of her had been trained to contain it. Elise left the archive without looking back. The building felt different now. Not abandoned, absolved. Like its purpose was fulfilled. She drove for hours without direction, letting instinct take the wheel. A constant pulse throbbed at the base of her skull, like a metronome no one else could hear. Each beat a tick on some invisible countdown. Her thoughts looped, repeated, fragmented. The conditioning wasn't dormant anymore. It was awakening. By dusk, she found herself parked in front of a nondescript suburban home in Westlake. Brown bricks. 2 windows. A modest porch. She didn't recognize it. And yet, she knew it. This was the next site. The next victim. Even though no case alert had come. No radio dispatch. No news. Just that internal certainty. The voice inside her saying, now. She walked up the path slowly, like an actress tracing familiar choreography. She reached for the doorknob, unlocked. The interior smelled of lavender and dust. Everything in the house was ordinary. Photos on the walls, stacked mail, a cat dish by the kitchen door. And then she saw it. A figure. Sitting silently in an armchair facing the window. A woman. Mid-40s. Eyes closed. Barely breathing. Elise stepped closer. The woman stirred. Opened her eyes slowly. She looked up. And whispered, "Redbird." The world tilted. Something inside Elise cracked like ice underfoot. Her vision narrowed. Her jaw clenched. The woman stood. Still calm. Still soft. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small device, a handheld transmitter, and clicked it on. Static. Then the signal. But this time, Kessler's voice didn't speak. Elise's did. From the speaker came her own voice, reciting. Observe. Accept. Neutralize the threat. The woman stared at her. You know what to do? Elise blinked. Sweat on her neck. Blood rushing in her ears. She looked down. Her hand was holding something. A syringe. She hadn't remembered drawing it from her coat. The liquid inside shimmered faintly in the light. Clear. Odorless. Medical. Lethal. The woman didn't flinch. She simply said, "It's time. Like you always said, we're only monsters when we forget why we were created." Elise stepped forward. No resistance. No words. She raised the syringe. The woman leaned her head to the side, exposing her neck. And Elise froze. Her arm trembled. A scream built in the back of her throat. I am not a weapon. But the voice inside her whispered, You are the correction. Her hand steadied. Then, a memory. Flashing. Splintered. Out of sequence. The woman. In a clinic. Smiling. Reaching out to Elise. A friend. A mentor. Lana Jiang. The second subject. She wasn't dead. She was waiting. Waiting to see if Elise would follow the script. Or break it. Elise's fingers loosened. The syringe fell to the floor. Shattered. Glass and chemicals pulled at her feet. Lana exhaled, a soft sound, somewhere between relief and sorrow. You broke the cycle, she said. That's good. That means phase 4 is different. Elise stepped back. You programmed me to kill you. No, Lana said. You did. You built this protocol. I volunteered to be your final test. Elise was shaking. Why? Why would I do this? Because you believed that a system built to dehumanize could be re-engineered. That obedience could be weaponized not just to destroy, but to protect. But to do that. She paused. You needed a way to know if the switch was still yours. Elise covered her mouth, nearly gasping. Lana stepped forward and handed her a small slip of paper. On it, a string of characters. A new phrase. A new trigger. One Elise had never heard before. You gave me this override. Told me never to say it unless the old you came back. The killer. The one who obeys without question. But I don't need it. Elise looked up. Because I'm still here? Lana nodded. Because you chose not to follow through. They sat in silence. The static from the transmitter slowly faded. No voice. No command. Just breath. Just awareness. Just her. Elise looked at her hands. No blood. No weapon. Just choice. She whispered to herself. I'm still mine. Chapter 15. The Message in Static. Elise Mercer sat on the floor of Lana Zhang's home long after the threat had passed. The syringe remained in shards across the hardwood. The transmitter, still hissing soft static, lay on the coffee table between them like a sleeping serpent. Its voice had fallen silent. No commands. No loop directives. Just that endless white hiss. And yet, the silence wasn't empty. It felt deliberate. Lana sat quietly nearby, wrapping her wrist in gauze where Elise had accidentally grabbed her in the panic. Neither of them had spoken for several minutes. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Eventually, Lana spoke. It's not just conditioning, you know. It's memory placement. Reverse-coded phrases. Patterned cadence designed to bypass critical processing and get stored directly into procedural memory. You didn't just forget, Elise. You were overwritten. Elise nodded slowly. I know. But that doesn't mean everything in your head is a lie, Lana said. You left yourself a map. In the places no one else could follow. Elise looked down at the transmitter again. Static still rolled. Do you remember what it's hiding? Lana didn't answer with words. She got up, walked to her bookshelf, and retrieved an old laptop. She opened it, typed in 2 passphrases, and opened an audio file titled Elise_code_signal001.wave. Then she turned the laptop toward her. Run it through spectrum analysis. Filter out frequencies above 10,000 Hz. You'll see. Elise frowned, pulled out her own recorder, and patched the signal into her software suite. The waveform looked like static, indistinct and chaotic. But when she ran the first layer of analysis, something snapped into focus. At exactly 3.8 kHz, buried beneath the static, was a low pattern. Almost musical. A repeating frequency spike. And embedded in the waveform. Morse code. Elise translated it. You left this for you, follow the fold. What is the fold? She asked. Lana answered without looking up. You created a way to store sensitive data inside meaningless sounds. Like embedding code inside noise. That was the fold. A hidden channel inside the signal. Only you could read it. Because only you would know to look. Elise's heart pounded. So all this time, while I was being programmed, I was also hiding messages from myself? Lana gave her a faint smile. Not hiding. Preserving. You knew you'd come undone. You just didn't know how many times. Elise scanned through the rest of the audio. Dozens of spikes. Each a message. Some incomplete. Some clear. She decoded a second one. Do not trust his death. Phase 5 requires a host. Then a third. If I am speaking, he isn't dead. Elise sat back, eyes spreading through her veins. If I'm speaking, he isn't dead? Lana nodded. You and Kessler weren't just a therapist and a patient. You were collaborators. He designed the behavioral framework, but you designed the contingency. A system that would keep the signal alive even if he wasn't. Elise whispered. I'm the host. Exactly, Lana said. That's why the messages are in your voice now. Not his. He's gone, Elise. You're not just the carrier anymore. You're the broadcaster. A long silence followed. Elise looked at the transmitter, then at her hands. All this time she had been hunting someone else. Trying to stop someone else. But now she understood. She was the last layer. The final backup. The voice of the signal had always been hers. Not because it was stolen from her, but because she gave it willingly. Lana placed a small, square case on the table. Inside, a drive labeled the signal core and a note written in the same script as the others. It read, Final gate key. For when she's ready to shut it all down. You left it with me years ago, Lana said. Told me to keep it safe in case you ever tried to destroy yourself before understanding what you were. Looks like it's time. Elise took the drive. Turned it over in her fingers. It was light. Ordinary. Unremarkable. And yet it contained the map of her mind, the original program, and maybe the instructions for how to unmake the monster without losing the woman. How do I start? She asked quietly. Lana answered. First, you go back to the beginning. The first transmission. The day you activated the signal. The day you started speaking. Elise nodded. Where? Lana stood and handed her a slip of paper. An address. Coordinates. Remote. Cold. Underground. You built it there. Out of reach. Out of time. Elise looked down at the address. And smiled faintly. Hollow. Determined. She was going to the origin. To the first broadcast. To the place where Elise Mercer had once given herself away. And maybe, just maybe, she'd find the last piece of herself waiting in the static. Chapter 16, Breaking the Loop. The drive Lana gave her felt heavier with every mile. Elise drove west, beyond Belridge, beyond the suburbs, beyond the reach of radio towers and cell coverage. Just her, the open road, and the coordinates that pointed to the origin. She passed into the woods at dawn. A forgotten service road cut through the trees like a scar, cracked asphalt, encroached by roots and moss, long since abandoned by city maps. The sun barely reached this deep. It didn't need to. She wasn't following light. She was following memory. And memory, for her, was now a weaponized machine. At the end of the road sat a facility built into a hillside, part bunker, part observatory, part echo chamber of her forgotten sins. The entrance was concrete, overgrown, and sealed with a rusted steel door. Painted across it in faint red letters, nearly worn away. Property of Neurocore Systems, clearance level 7 required. Elise placed her hand against the access panel. No beep. No prompt. Then, the static in her ear clicked, from the recorder clipped to her coat. And her own voice whispered, "Open the channel." The panel lit up green. The door groaned open. Inside, darkness. Thick. Concrete walls swallowed sound. The temperature dropped. Her breath formed clouds as she stepped into a long corridor lined with lead shielding and acoustic foam, built to keep something in, not out. Lights flickered to life, motion activated. Ahead, a control chamber encased in glass. Inside, mounted on a pedestal, the original broadcast core. A device no bigger than a typewriter, but surrounded by layers of analog switches, reel-to-reel machines, and wiring so complex it looked organic. The core was still active. Not transmitting. Just waiting. Like it had been listening this whole time. Waiting for her. She placed Lana's drive into the input port on the main terminal. The screens around her buzzed. Then loaded a script, hundreds of lines of code written in fragmented syntax. Half software, half language. She recognized the structure. Her structure. The signal phase engine, owner, Mercer E. Final override detected. Engaging termination protocol. Break the loop. A soft voice played from the overhead speakers. Her voice. Younger. Hopeful. If you're hearing this, you've reached the point I feared, or hoped, you never would. You've broken through phase 4. You've survived the corrections. You are now immune to suggestion. Which means you are dangerous. To them. To yourself. To me. Elise stepped forward. The room was alive now, humming with resonance. Her past, her design, her ghost. This loop was never meant to last forever. The message continued. It was meant to prove a principle. That a human mind could be split, and that the better half might eventually return. Silence. Then, if you choose to break the loop, all conditioned pathways will collapse. There will be no signal. No Kessler. No backup routines. You will be only what remains. Do you accept? Elise's fingers hovered over the console. And paused. Was she ready to destroy the only thing that had defined her for the past 6 years? Could she live without the architecture of control? Would there even be anything left of her once it was gone? Then she looked to the side of the console. Someone, maybe Kessler, maybe her, had carved a small phrase into the metal with a knife. It read, "Obedience isn't safety. It's sedation." She exhaled. Then typed the phrase into the console. Break the loop. The machine responded immediately. Switches clicked. Reels spun. The humming stopped. One by one, the systems powering the signals shut down. Lights dimmed. Fans slowed. The entire room seemed to exhale. Then silence. Not static. Not whispers. Not echoes. Just silence. The kind that felt earned. She sat on the floor of the chamber. The final chamber. The final echo. And for the first time in years, Elise Mercer didn't hear anyone else's voice. Not Kessler. Not Lana. Not the one inside her head that whispered commands. Just breath. Just blood. Just being. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just existed. Without a script. Without a purpose she hadn't written. And though her memories were fractured, though she might never know exactly how many layers of herself she'd built and buried, she had finally done what none of her versions had done before. She had stopped the signal. And chosen silence.
The case may be closed for now, but mysteries always leave behind new questions. If you enjoyed this investigation, leave a like. Every clue you find keeps the trail alive. Share your theories in the comments. Your mind might be sharper than you think. And subscribe to our channel Detective Mystery Stories. where every case hides a deeper secret, and every secret deserves to be uncovered. The next mystery is already waiting for you.